Hey y'all, I'm your host Amaje, and welcome to Rewatch, a podcast where I binge your favorite shows as fast as I can. A couple of weeks ago, we spun a wheel and I announced that we'd be spending time with America's favorite redhead and that our new show would be Reba. I estimated myself 12 days to finish all 6 seasons, which is 120 episodes. I hate to admit it, but I kinda don't, but I did not make that goal. Unfortunately, life has been getting in the way a bit more lately, so I've only completed seasons 3 and 4 since our last episode, which is still like 40-something episodes. But I feel like I'm not that beat up about it because now we get to talk about seasons 3 and 4 in more depth, because I feel like a lot went down in these 2 seasons and rushing them wouldn't be doing the show or you guys justice. So next week, we'll be covering the last 2 seasons, and I promise to make it good for you. Next week, we will also be spinning a wheel to choose our next show, which will be a drama series. So keep sending me show ideas for the next one. Thank you so much to those who already have. All right, now let's get back to the show. Last week we left on a cliffhanger with Kira deciding if she wants to move out of Reba's house and into Barbara Jean and Brock's house. I do want to add that this premiere is a supersized episode and is longer than the standard. The first episode opens up right where we left season 2. Kira decides that she wants to move. Reba decides to act rationally about it, and it's coming off supportive. And I just have to say that the casting for toddler Kira was so perfect with her little red ponytails. So, because Kira decides to move out, Cheyenne is trying to get her to stay because she knows that it's actually hurting her mom to watch her go. Van is so sure because he and Reba prayed in the last episode that God won't let him down and won't let her leave. He takes the sign of him finding a Corvette as confirmation after he prayed for Corvette and prayed for Kira not to leave. Eventually, Reba stops pretending that she's supportive of her move and tells Kira that if she moves, she can't come back. Later, Reba realizes that by telling her not to come back, that she'd be pushing her away, just like she did Brock. Because in another flashback, we get to see the night that they decided to separate. Brock and Reba can't stop fighting, and he suggests maybe they spend some time apart. And Reba says, fine, but if you go out that door, don't plan on coming back. And that was pretty much the end of them. That was such a heavy opener. Like, yes, there were some funny parts sprinkled in, but it was a very serious episode overall, which is a big leap from seasons 1 and 2, which were essentially all comedy and the topics weren't as serious. Like, it was crazy to see Reba simultaneously being a wreck and kind of a bully at the same time because she was so hurt. At the end of the day, it wasn't even about Reba. It was literally about Kira. Kira wanted to be a priority in her home, and that wasn't going to happen at Reba's house. And Cheyenne low-key turning on Kira to bully her was also messed up. Kira was just constantly not being seen over and over again, and her feelings were being invalidated, and I'm glad she got out. Here's the thing, though. I feel like everyone was blowing it out of proportion. Kira was literally moving down the street. I think they're like, 4 houses down or something like that. And in every other episode, she's at Reba's house doing something because it's her home, and she's not just going to abandon the people in it. The little flashbacks that we got during the episode were so cute, but also really relevant to the story as a whole. It gives context to why Brock and Reba broke up in the first place. They were constantly fighting and for no reason, so Brock suggested time apart, and Reba, as Reba does, pretending like it wasn't a big deal and that she wanted him to go, which obviously wasn't true. And we could see that was the point that she truly gave up on her marriage when she chose not to fight for Brock to stay. I think during that scene, he even asks her, "You're not even going to ask me to stay?" And she tells him if he leaves, he can't come back. And he didn't. In a way, she pushed him out of the door. As we know from last season, Brock is a guy who likes to feel wanted and needed in his relationships. And this seems like it was the last straw for him. This kind of sets up a storyline that brings me around to my favorite episode of the season. My favorite episode of season 3 is episode 20, called The Good Girl. It was just such a good episode. I think I like it so much because it was actually about something serious and is light on the comedy. So the episode starts with Kira wanting to go on a date with her 17-year-old boyfriend, but Reba only allows them to see each other on group date because he's 17. And yes, there is no reason why a 17-year-old should be dating a 14-year-old. And yes, it's freaking weird. So all of Kira's friends are busy and they can't go out with him. So Van and Cheyenne offer to double date with them. While Cheyenne and Van are waiting for Kira's date to show up, Kira walks in telling them that he dumped her. In the meantime, Barbara Jean thinks Brock is cheating on her because of some weird behaviors he's been doing, like hanging up the phone when she comes into the room and, just typical cheater looking stuff. Reba confronts Brock about his alleged affair. All throughout the season, Brock has been going through something where he feels like he needs to find himself or feeling lost about things in his life. Brock confesses to Reba that he's not cheating, but has been seeing a therapist and has been diagnosed with clinical depression. He also tells her that the therapist has prescribed him antidepressants and he's been taking them. Reba feels like he needs to tell Barbara Jean what's going on, and when he does, she freaks out. The conversation around this is so terribly sad, but I can kind of see the point of view from both sides. One side being more valid in my opinion. Obviously Brock's. Barbara Jean feels like he doesn't need to be on antidepressant because she feels like it invalidates the relationship. She thinks that if he chose her while he was unwell, that now he's on antidepressants and maybe can gain some more clarity, that he'll come to realize that he made a mistake choosing her. Barbara Jean doesn't want him to be on them, so she storms off. Reba tries to offer him some comfort and let him know that after he left their relationship, she actually was on antidepressants for a while as well. I know this is breaking the rules, but I feel like I have to talk about the episode after this one, episode 21, because it is a continued storyline. In this episode, Barbara Jean is still upset about Brock using his antidepressants, and a lot of the conversation about it are so stigmatized, calling them happy pills and just other things that are just going to make Brock essentially feel worse. At some point, Brock tells Van that he's on antidepressants because he feels like it would be easier to talk to him rather than his biological children, and Van starts freaking out and hiding knives because he thinks that Brock could snap at any moment. And yes, Van's ignorance is kind of funny, but you could see that Brock was actually hurt about it. Like, dude was just making a sandwich. Chill out. In my opinion, I feel like Barbara Jean should have went to therapy with Brock to hear the doctor explain how antidepressants work and how they actually could help him. I also feel like out of all the things that would make Barbara Jean question Brock's love for her, it's him choosing to get better, but not the whole he only left his wife for me because I got pregnant thing. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, Barbara Jean is mostly mad at Reba because she told Brock to stay on them, which she thinks of as meddling in their marriage, even though Barbara Jean was the one to ask Reba to talk to him in the first place. So Barbara Jean gives Reba the silent treatment and refuses to talk to her. Now, at this point in the series, Barbara Jean and Reba are actually pretty good friends. So it's kind of getting to Reba the silent treatment. At the bar for Cheyenne's 21st birthday girls night out, because that's also happening, Reba and Barbara Jean get into a physical fight. But it's not much of a fight because Reba is significantly smaller than Barbara Jean. Barbara Jean's like 6 feet tall and could squash Reba if she really wanted to. But eventually, after they get kicked out of the bar, they have a heart-to-heart and decide to move on. While the girls are out, Brock has been trying to figure out how to tell his kids about being on antidepressants. He tried to tell Kira earlier, but she was confiding in him about her breakup, and he made the mistake of basically telling her to toughen up. Bad things happen. He was feeling like he was a bit of a hypocrite because he felt like he didn't tough it out with his depression. He eventually tells her that he's on antidepressants, and it turned into a bit of a bonding experience, because now she can relate to him more because she felt like he was always trying to be the perfect man. I feel like Brock was rushing himself to tell his kids. If he's not ready to reveal that part about him, I don't think he should have. He's clearly uncomfortable with it and knows that his family probably won't take it well. So I just thought that was probably bad timing. All right, let's get into my favorite character of this season. Hands down, it's Kira. She was just given great storylines this season and a good story arc from the top of the season. Kira makes a decision to choose herself first and move out of her mother's house. She knows it hurts her mother, but she knows it's what's best for her. She's literally a 14-year-old kid and has to make a decision like that because the adults in her life are quite literally not seeing her. In the weed episode, and yes, I said weed, as in Mary Jane, as in marijuana, Kira is asked by her family about marijuana use, and she tells them the truth in contrast to Brock lying about it. But I get it. It's Texas and it's still illegal in 2023, and he was a dentist and whatnot. But anyway, that's not the point of this podcast. She takes the opportunity to learn from her dad's past and asks him questions so she can understand pressures more. Then she learns how to say no from Reba because Reba has never smoked weed. One of the cute episodes that she had was when she bought a cat home, even though her dad was allegedly allergic, and her and Barbara Jean hide the cat around the house. Turns out Barbara Jean was the one who was allergic to cats, so she had to stash the cat at her mom's house and make Van hide it. One thing about Kira, and that's for the most part, she tells the truth. She never really has a reason to lie, unless it's like a joke or something. She's honest about boys and where she's at, and definitely her feelings, except in episode 16 where she's been skipping school because of a bully. The bully essentially has been making fun of her because of Cheyenne's teen pregnancy, and eventually eventually she stands up to the bully and punches her in the face, which we didn't get to see. Which, like, we know violence is bad, but if somebody called my sister a slut, there's clearly going to be a problem. All right, let's get to my least favorite character of the season, which could arguably be one of the funniest characters on the show in general. But this season, it's Barbara Jean. Barbara Jean in season 3 is a bit of a roller coaster because once Kira moves in, she's struggling to parent her, so she lets Kira run all over her. But once she gets the hang of it, she starts spying on Kira, going through her emails and her bag, even following her around. She gets really judgy after Brock admits that he smoked weed back in the day. But when Brock wants to quit dentistry, she holds her tongue because she's scared that he'll leave her because she literally saw him leave Reba for not being the supportive wife, which is not a reason to deal with your husband making terrible decisions. She sets Reba up on a date with the iconic Leslie Jordan, R.I.P. But by the end of the date, Reba and him are bonding and Barbara Jean gets jealous. And then in the final few episodes, the way she handled Brock's therapy journey, if I was Brock, that would have hurt me so deep. Also, in those episodes, she decides that she wants to have a baby and wants Brock to get his vasectomy reversed because she thinks it'll fix him. Now, on to the most shocking part of the season. And if you've heard a few episodes, you probably know what it's gonna be. A cliffhanger. It's just something about cliffhangers that I love. At this point, I'm an addict. In the season finale, Van and Cheyenne decide to move out. Since Van is now playing arena football and is getting a steady paycheck, they can afford a place up to $700 a month, which is pretty decent in Houston, I guess. I have no idea. Van and Cheyenne go apartment hunting and find a dope apartment. The only downside is that it costs $1,500 a month. So they asked Reba to co-sign for them. Obviously, with Reba having the sense that she has, she says no. But those crazy kids decided to forge her signature. They did all that to try to get this apartment and get denied because Reba's credit is in the toilet, which makes sense because she was supporting 5 kids all in her home after her husband left her. Obviously, she would have had some money problems in the past. Barbara Jean wants Brock to get his vasectomy reversed, which could not be worse timing considering his recent depression diagnosis. Because Barbara Jean keeps stressing him out about it, eventually Brock blows up and yells at Barbara Jean. I'm not sure why they're not in couples therapy right now though, but Brock ends up confiding in Reba that he's hurting so bad because he knows he's hurting his entire family around him. She comforts him and ends up hugging him, which low-key, that hug was pretty intimate looking, like hand on the back of the head intimate. But that's besides the point. Barbara Jean sees them embracing and thinks that something else is going on. Reba goes over to Brock's house to check on him later, and Brock confesses to Reba that he made a mistake ending their marriage. And the episode literally ends right there. In the middle of that conversation. Like, this episode blew me. You got Cheyenne and Van being sneaky, shady, crazy, and then Brock and his feelings. But, like, he's in therapy. He should be talking to his therapist about these things, not his ex-wife. Point blank, period. Child, let's get to season 4 already so we can see where this confession gets us. So, episode 1 picks up literally seconds after Brock says that ending his first marriage might have been a mistake. I feel like Brock is really just kind of being selfish with this confession. Like, in the previous episode, he's literally crying because he's hurting everybody, but then says this knowing that it could tear up everything. This episode honestly feels like it belongs in season 3, and if they did a 23-24 episode season, it should have been there. But I digress. Brock's soul is just being tortured. Essentially, he is being incredibly indecisive over what to do. And it's ruining Barbara Jean. She kicks him out because she doesn't want to settle and she wants him to choose her and not be flighty about it. Coming from me, I know how an indecisive partner can destroy you. You feel like at any moment you might not be what they want and they could dip out on you at any moment because they're constantly looking for things to make them happy as if you're not good enough. Anyway, my life. In season 4, Brock has moved out and is living in a condo on his own, and as a result, Kira is taking care of Barbara Jean. Because as much as she tries to hide it, she's actually feeling down about Brock being gone. To cheer up, Reba and her start going out to bars to find Reba a man. Van has to get his contract renewed, but doesn't have an agent, so he knows absolutely nothing about what he's doing, so Reba makes him get an agent. Trying to bond with this potential new agent, he makes a gay joke, but then she tells him that she's gay, and he nervously responds that, my mother-in-law is super gay. Reba basically asked the woman on a date because she wants more girlfriends, but didn't realize that she was kind of asking her out. One of the funniest parts of the season is when Van comes home drunk after a night out with the boys and wanders into Reba's room and ends up in her bed. Like, this man was like shirtless in the bed, like lucky finna do some things. But Reba scared him and he fell out of the bed. And he obviously realized that she was not his wife. Now, time for my favorite episode, which includes one of my favorite celebrities. It's season 4, episode 18. Entitled Reba's Rules of Real Estate. In this episode, Reba has an interview for a real estate firm in the next few days, but the interviewer shows up randomly to her house, and we meet the godmother of Hannah Montana, the big hair blonde bombshell that we all know and love, Dolly Parton. She guest stars as Dolly Majors. Reba's completely unprepared, which was the way that Dolly likes it, because she wants to see how quickly she thinks on her feet. When Dolly stops by, she brings Jake a BB gun. Now, we know from previous seasons that this is the rare gun-free household in Texas, so Reba's not really into it. Dolly ends up liking Reba and hires her for the job. Reba leaves the room to get some celebratory champagne, and Dolly somehow ends up selling Van and Cheyenne a house. Now, we know Van and Cheyenne can't afford no house, but Dolly simply doesn't care and is all about making that sale. Brock and Barbara Jean come over because they didn't know about the surprise interview, obviously, and interrupt because that's just who they are. Brock somehow gets left alone with Dolly, and she ends up selling him a vacation home. I have no idea how Brock has all this money, by the way. He's divorced, has 3 kids under the age of 18, and is paying for a condo. There must be a lot of money in dentistry than I thought. Or maybe the people in Houston just really need him that bad. By the end of the visit, Reba has to stand up to Dolly because she knows that her kids can't afford to buy a house, and Brock shouldn't be buying a vacation home. Dolly tells Reba that she's impressed that she stood up to her, but she rescinds the job offer anyway because Dolly needs a shark, and Reba can't be that for her right now. But she'll make sure to spread her name around town so she gets some good offers somewhere. Y'all, I literally just love this episode so much because Dolly's in it, and she's a national treasure and should be protected and treated as such. I wish I could make her my favorite character of the season, but since she's only in one episode, I guess I can't do that. But I can choose Barbara Jean. Now, she was my least favorite character last season, and a lot of that was in response to Brock's behavior. This season, I feel like she's trying to figure herself out without Brock being her complete center. She kicks her husband out because she feels like he should choose her automatically. She does get down in the dumps, but she manages to recover with the help of her friend. She eventually does so. She does couples therapy with Brock, which definitely helps their marriage. At one point, she's fully prepared to divorce Brock because she wants him to choose their family over golf, which is a reasonable ask. There's an episode where the kids want to have Thanksgiving at Barbara Jean and Brock's house, but Reba wants everybody at her house. So the compromise ends up being that Barbara Jean cooks at Reba's house and everyone is together that way. Reba's micromanaging sends Barbara Jean off, and she finally stands up to Reba. Unfortunately, she thinks the family bails on her when they all go outside to play football while she was preparing the meal, and she leaves in the middle of cooking dinner and goes home to sulk. Reba eventually shows up and tells her that everything's going to be okay, makes her feel better and all that jazz. And they go back, she finishes the meal, and everyone loves it. Now, the worst character of season 4, no question, is Brock. Yes, Brock is going through some things mentally, but he's letting it completely dismantle the people around him, which I think is incredibly selfish. He randomly decides that he wants to become a professional golfer, then quits his job. Fortunately, he only goes down a part-time at the dentist's office because he wouldn't be able to pay his bills otherwise. He's just making some poor decisions overall, and I feel like he was leading Reba on a little bit. Like, obviously they don't want to be together, but he constantly was getting up in her face and making his relationship problems her problems, and at one point he literally spends the night at her house without her knowledge, and I feel like that's a real line that was crossed. Because his part-time dentisting isn't working, he decides that he wants to sell his dental practice, but later changes his mind. After him and Barbara Jean get back together, they go on vacation without Kira because she doesn't want to go because, teenager. And Kira thinks that they are happier when she's not around. And he truly considers the fact that this could be true. He feels like he might have some resentment towards Kira for some reason. His own child. He chickens out on selling his condo after he moves back with Barbara Jean, and it turns out he can't sell it because he took out a second mortgage on it without discussing that with his wife because he wasn't at making enough money playing golf. And he gets into this anonymous poker game and flirts with one of the players, and that player turns out to be Reba, unbeknownst to him, of course. But why is dude flirting online and in a poker game nonetheless? Like, out of all the places, he doesn't spend enough time with Jake, so he signs Jake up for football so he can coach him, and constantly criticizes this 10-year-old boy's masculinity. Like, that part was so weird. I also feel like they randomly softened Jake for this episode so they could take shots at him, because he's always been a dirty little boy to me. Anyways, that's all the bashing I have for Brock. Now, time for the most shocking episode of season 4, which once again is a finale, but doesn't end on a cliffhanger this time. In the episode before this one, episode 21, Reba finds an empty alcohol bottle in Van's closet. Now, mind you, this is the closet that he shares with his wife, Cheyenne. Reba sees it and thinks that he has a problem with drinking. Turns out the whole time that the empty bottle belongs to Cheyenne, and turns out that she's low-key an alcoholic. Reba makes Van go to an AA meeting, but he doesn't need it because he's not an alcoholic, and he found it incredibly boring. But it's Van, so everything's boring for him if it's not on TV. Reba is being weird about Van whenever she sees him drink anything and is hovering. So he pranks her by mixing prune juice and vinegar into his coffee mug and like pretends like there's alcohol in it. And so Reba drinks to prove that he's been drinking, and eventually you get a really good laugh out of it. Cheyenne admits to the bottle being hers and that she's the one who's an alcoholic. She goes to an AA meeting and loves it because she gets to talk about her favorite person in the world, which is herself. In solidarity, the other adults of the family try not to drink also, but they end up drinking at Brock and Barbara Jean's house in secret, hiding from Cheyenne. Later in the episode, Reba catches Cheyenne drinking a glass of wine because she doesn't think that she's as bad off as the other people in AA. Now, personally, I think this storyline was really random because we've only seen Cheyenne get drunk like once, and that was on her 21st birthday, which is reasonable, but apparently she's been secretly drinking and hiding it from her family. And with that declaration in season 4, and season 5 begins Cheyenne's new journey, but we're going to talk about that next week along with season 6. We've got a lot to do next week. We've got to cover the last 2 seasons, and we're spinning a wheel for our next show, so tune in. Be sure to follow the pod's social media pages, and feel free to recommend your favorite show and send me some drama. Send me more. I need more. Make sure you're following the podcast on Instagram at RewatchPod and Twitter at RewatchPod_ for more content. Make sure you're following the pod wherever you listen to podcasts. And lastly, please rate the pod 5 stars. Anyways, back to binging. Try and catch me.